Roughly 100 miles of water separate Taiwan from mainland China. On one side, one of the largest militaries on Earth. On the other, an island the entire global economy quietly depends on. The next crisis may not begin with troops landing on a beach. It could begin with ports closing, cables going dark, ships receiving orders to turn around. Before anyone agrees that a war has started, the world may already be inside one. Taiwan governs itself, its own elections, its own military, its own laws, its own currency. By almost every practical measure, it functions like a sovereign state. Beijing sees it differently, as unfinished business from a civil war that never formally ended, and it has never renounced the option of force to settle it. Most of the world avoids picking a side outright. The United States maintains close, unofficial ties with Taiwan, but keeps its exact response to an attack deliberately unclear. That vagueness has a name: strategic ambiguity. It's designed to discourage two things at once: a Chinese attack and a Taiwanese declaration of formal independence. For decades, it worked. But ambiguity that prevents a war can also feed one, if a crisis moves faster than anyone expects. Beijing may calculate that Washington will hesitate. Taipei may assume Washington will intervene. Washington may try to delay a final answer as long as possible. Three governments, three different bets on what the others will do. This is what makes the Strait dangerous, not simply the militaries facing each other, but the fact that no one can say exactly where deterrence ends and war begins. A military exercise can look like an invasion rehearsal. A blockade can be called an inspection. A missile can be called a warning shot until it lands. In this kind of crisis, the first fatal mistake may not come from a decision to attack. It may come from every side assuming the other will back down first. The Taiwan Strait is not protected by a clear agreement. It is protected by several governments hoping they understand one another correctly. An amphibious invasion would be massive, visible, and costly, the kind of operation that gives the world weeks of warning. A blockade could look almost nothing like that. It could begin as an announcement, military exercises, closed-off zones for missile tests, naval drills near key approaches. Coast Guard vessels could start boarding or redirecting commercial ships under the language of inspection. Aircraft could pressure civilian flight paths without a single shot fired. None of this needs to sink a ship. Insurers could simply stop covering vessels bound for Taiwanese ports. Shipping companies could start turning around voluntarily, long before any vessel is fired on. The harbors could stay standing, cranes intact, docks empty, while the trade that keeps Taiwan running quietly stops arriving. Taiwan imports much of its energy and raw material. That makes time the real weapon. Beijing may not need to starve the island for months. It may only need to convince markets, insurers, and shipping firms that supply is about to stop and let fear do the rest. This is where Washington's choices get difficult. Escorting commercial ships through a blockade could break it and could also produce the first direct clash between American and Chinese forces. Standing back avoids that clash but lets the pressure build. China could call the entire operation an internal matter, a quarantine, a temporary exercise. Taiwan would call it an act of war. The world would spend critical days arguing over which word applies, while cargo ships sat outside the strait, going nowhere. China may not need to conquer Taiwan. It may only need the world to become afraid of reaching it. Taiwan's connection to the rest of the world runs largely through undersea cables, physical lines lying across the seabed, vulnerable to anchors, earthquakes, accidents, or sabotage whose true cause may never be proven. One cable failure is routine. Several failing at once in the middle of a military standoff feels like something else entirely. Internet speeds collapse, international calls drop, banking systems lag, government sites go dark one by one. Into that silence, rumors move faster than facts. Fake videos claim political leaders have already fled. False evacuation orders circulate online. Messages insist the military has quietly surrendered. Cyberattacks strain power stations, ports, rail networks, hospitals, and telecom systems, not necessarily to destroy them, but to make people unsure which systems still work and which reports can be trusted. Beijing wouldn't need total darkness. It would need confusion. A population that can't communicate clearly becomes easier to intimidate, and a foreign government that loses visibility into events becomes slower to respond. A cable break could be sabotage. It could be an accident. A cyber attack could be state-directed, or built to look like something else entirely. That uncertainty alone could stall any outside reaction for hours that matter. In this scenario, the war doesn't start with a missile. It starts below the sea and inside networks, long before anything visible happens on the water. Taiwan may not know it's under attack when the first system fails. It may know only when every explanation on every screen begins to sound equally believable. Taiwan produces a share of the world's most advanced semiconductors that no other country can currently replace. Those chips run phones, data centers, vehicles, satellites, weapon systems, and the artificial intelligence infrastructure much of the modern economy now depends on. There's a popular theory that this makes war less likely a silicon shield, the idea that Taiwan's importance is itself a deterrent. But something that valuable can just as easily become something worth controlling, not just protecting. Nobody needs to bomb a fabrication plant to stop it running. These facilities need constant electricity, ultra-pure water, specialist chemicals, skilled engineers, and an unbroken flow of parts and software support from around the world. A blockade, a power failure, a cyber attack, or an evacuation of staff could throttle production without a single explosion. The moment output slows, global companies start rationing, markets react within hours. Factories on the other side of the planet feel it within weeks, and it leaves Washington facing an impossible bet. Intervene to protect the chip supply and risk the war that destroys it, or stay back and lose it anyway to the crisis itself. China would lose access to those same chips in a prolonged conflict. That doesn't make the standoff safe, it makes it mutually destructive, with each side possibly convinced the other has more to lose. The factories become both a shield and a hostage at the same time. The silicon shield may only protect Taiwan for as long as every side believes breaking it costs more than controlling it. In this scenario, it starts on an ordinary morning in Taipei. China announces new military exercises around the island. At first, they resemble drills the world has seen before. Then the exclusion zones expand. Commercial ships get inspection orders. Civilian flights start rerouting around closed airspace. Within hours, several undersea cables fail. Government networks slow to a crawl. Unverified reports claim senior officials have already left the island. Chinese Coast Guard and naval vessels quietly take up positions around the main approaches. Beijing insists no invasion is underway. This is temporary, defensive, internal. Taiwan calls it a blockade. Washington refuses to accept that framing but doesn't fire. Japan puts its forces on alert. American ships move closer, staying just outside the exclusion lines. Insurance markets freeze shipping into the region. Semiconductor customers worldwide start triggering emergency contingency plans. Taipei orders reserve mobilization and asks citizens to conserve fuel. Cyber attacks hit banks, transit systems, and media outlets. Somewhere in the Strait, a patrol vessel collides with or fires on another ship. Each side releases contradicting footage. Nobody can agree who fired first. Beijing sets a deadline for negotiations. Washington must decide whether to escort a cargo ship through the line. Turning back strengthens the blockade. Pushing through risks. One radar lock, one warning shot, one frightened commander turning a standoff into a battle. No leader in this scenario wants a wider war. Each one may simply believe that backing down now guarantees a worse crisis later. That's the real danger, not a flawless plan executed by one side, but thousands of decisions, military and political, unfolding faster than diplomacy can keep pace with. A Taiwan war may begin without an invasion, and the world may enter it before any government agrees that it has started.